Welcome to Corporate Cafecito,
a Latin and business podcast where we share insights and strategies to help entrepreneurs and professionals thrive.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez Gas. And today, one of the things that we have been so lucky, and that's, I would even say, new within the past couple years, is how many Latino authors are out there promoting, talking about how to succeed, sharing their stories, sharing their values, connecting with our people, and showing us the path, the way to do better, the way we can grow. And, we just had Reina Grande and today we have Isaias Mercado. So Isaias, welcome to Corporate Cafecito.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Nayeli. I'm honored to be here. I've heard great things about this podcast, and I'm excited to share this time with you.
Well, one of the things that Corporate Cafecito is known for is we really want to make sure that what we're doing is helping the next generation, building people up, giving them the skill set, the lessons, the sharing of the knowledge that we need in order to make people better. And I know that is the premise of your book.
It is. I think that right now we have, in the workforce, we have an engagement problem. We know that.
Yeah.
Gallup study has been studying this for years, and they come back and say there's 3 types of workers in the United States. I was a pastor, so I have like 3 names. 30% are considered, engaged. They're excited about their job. I call them the producers, right? And then 50% are considered disengaged. I call them the passengers. Que están ahí solamente por el chequecito,
just hanging out,
just
buying time.
And then the last group is actively disengaged. I call them the provocateurs. They're the ones, los problemáticos, and stuff like that.
Los que are like, always causing a ruckus, or contrarians, right? Where they're like, that didn't work. We're not going to try that again.
Right. They're rowing against against the alignment of an organization. So I, based on my experience working with different companies, I kept on hearing, hey, how do you provide feedback? How do you give feedback? And stuff like that. So I said, you know what? I was a preacher, so I said, why I'm a preacher? I said, let me work with the F words. Y ahí me salió 10 F words on how to provide effective feedback. Not on how to only give, but how to receive feedback as well.
Feedback is so hard for us. I struggle with feedback. I know, when I went out on my own, the first thing I said was like, I'll never have an annual review again. And I had good reviews, but just hearing the critiques or, areas. And I mean, I knew the way, right? Good, then the problem, then the other good, the sandwich effect. I knew all the things, and it would still always hurt my feelings. And I'll tell you, I feel like a lot of it is from our culture, where desde chiquita they're telling you what you're doing wrong, or what you don't have cabeza for, or what your tías and saying like, oh, ya engordaste, ya emplacaste, cuando vas a tener novia, cuando vas a, when are you gonna have a kid? All these things, it feels like we get judged our whole life. So feedback, to me, always feels like a little bit of judgment.
And I agree. I think, unfortunately, especially when in the workplace, a lot of people can't separate, and it's usually how we give it. We can't separate worth from work.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. How do we give? So I'm talking about, in this book, we're talking about how to, just some practical guides and some practical principles to be more effective in the feedback, and how to share it and how to receive feedback. I'm not a sandwich guy. Yeah. I know that's a staple.
I know, I would be like, oh, here it comes. Yeah. Here comes the good, so here comes the bad.
Right. Yeah. And I think it starts diluting the message. Yeah. People almost start thinking, this is not authentic. Ahí viene el pero, there comes the but. So I think, we don't use the sandwich approach. I do believe it's probably appropriate for some professions, like therapists and pastors, and have to hold space for the person for a little bit, but not in the workforce. So I'm a believer of using a system that I call appreciative and transformative.
Tell me more. What is that?
So appreciative is...
But don't give all the spoilers. You guys got to buy the books.
Yes, please. So what I would say is, first of all, wrong definitions lead to wrong destinations, right? And so feedback for me is a timely insight that celebrates strength and guides growth. So that's what feedback is
Yeah.
for me. Appreciative is when, so historically we've always used positive and constructive, or it used to be positive and negative.
Yeah.
But I think eso es como, it's very demoralizing. I don't know. I just don't like that language. I think I didn't resonate with that language. So, so we came up with appreciative and transformative. Appreciative taking the place of positive. And it's a 4-step process for that is where you specifically are sharing what the person did well. And then here, that's the
Hmm.
first step. Then the second step, obviously, we're being specific with that. Then the second step is obviously explaining the impact of that behavior that they did well, and then appreciate that behavior, and then show confidence that that behavior is going to repeat itself. So that's that reinforcement
That's really
piece.
good.
So that's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
four-part appreciative type of framework that we use, that we think it's more, it resonates and it connects more with people,
Hmm.
because feedback should be a roadmap. It shouldn't be a verdict.
Yes.
Right. So I think that's
God, I
important.
love that.
Yeah.
Feedback should be a roadmap, not a verdict. Yeah.
So I think
That,
that's a
you know
fun.
what? I think even just framing that in the mindset of it's a roadmap is makes feedback more digestible.
Yeah, and it has to, because we cannot grow without feedback.
No, no,
Uh,
we need feedback.
Yeah, and I say in the book that feedback doesn't define us; it refines us, right? And I think that's why we need to ask for feedback. Now, when I was doing some research, I noticed that the feedback literature out there is about how to give it only. So this book is also trying to say, how do you receive it? How do you ask for it? So I created a formula for
I
that
like
as
that.
well. So the 10 F words. Then I also have 5 types of feedback givers and
Okay.
5 types of feedback receivers, that I played with that a little bit. So I think it's going to be, hopefully it's a playbook that just
Hmm.
add values to people in their leadership.
You know, it's. I think it's really important when we get feedback. You know, I like that you have the 5 feedback givers and the 5 feedback receivers, because I always tell people, like, in order to, like, there has to be some sort of trust in the feedback giver from the receiver, right?
Mhm.
Because oftentimes we get a lot of feedback, some solicited, some unsolicited. And, you know, sometimes that unsolicited feedback from people we don't trust impacts us a lot.
That's right.
You know, I'll tell you one time, I was in high school. I was working at a call center. And I remember I wanted to study journalism and be
Mm.
a news reporter. Maybe that's why I do the podcast. But anyway, and I remember someone saying, "Don't you think you're a little too ethnic for that?"
Wow.
And, you know, I've talked about this several times on this podcast, but I was like, maybe I am. And I remember
Mm.
watching the news and being like, no one looks like me. And it kind of just took the wind out of my sail, like, just, yeah, wind out of my sails. I'm like, I
Right.
don't know, I'm not a sailor, but you know, that feedback
Yeah.
maybe changed the course of my career from someone who I can't even remember.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so I think I think there's certain feedback that we get when it's like so personal, or like if it's a dream, that sometimes we let it impact us more than it should.
And it's unfortunate, I believe that feedback is to promote, not provoke,
Yeah.
right? And feedback is there. It's a bridge. It's a bridge from where we are to where we want to be, and that's why we need that feedback. It's that gap. So yeah, I believe that's sad to hear that people still give that type of information or feedback.
Well, this
Yeah.
was 30 years ago.
Well, you're doing great. I love this cafecito concept. It's awesome.
So what's been some of the best feedback you've gotten?
Personally,
Yeah.
yeah, personally, I think one of the best feedback I received was after facilitating a workshop.
Hmm.
I told you I was a pastor for many years, and the last 6 years, actually for the last 10 years, I've been doing workforce development training. But I would never tell people that I was a pastor, right? I would just facilitate and stuff like that. And someone came up to me one time and said, "Hey, by the way, were you ever a pastor or a preacher or something?" And I never forget that I fumbled a little bit and I said, "Yeah, I was." And then she told me, "You know what? Don't hide that. It just leaks. It
Yeah.
pours out anyways." So that was an insight, a feedback that at that moment just just like set me free, gave me a
Yeah,
little bit
just
more
released
freedom,
you. Yeah.
release me to just be more myself in the workplace, in work, what we would call the marketplace or the workforce development field, and it just led me to I became more confident, and so that was a feedback that actually summoned the best out of me versus shame. So
Right.
that's another thing that we believe in. One of the laws of feedback is the law of faith, that it has to you have to believe that it has the potential of changing someone. So that feedback actually summoned something out of me that I thought was very powerful.
Right now you said shame, and I think that sometimes with feedback we do feel shame,
Mm-hmm.
right? And shame is the belief that you did something bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's probably the hardest part about receiving feedback is when you get something that's negative, like that was a really positive experience.
Mm-hmm.
But has there been something that maybe shook you, or that you were like, oh God, how do I take that home, or how do I swallow that feedback?
Yeah, I recently started a leadership development program with the company that I'm working with, NIAB, and it's online. We have like 40 leaders, and just the way I'm wired, the way I'm passionate about the subject, this is totally online, and I could just see myself just being totally excited and being overpowering, and sometimes calling out people, hey, engage, where you at, and stuff like that. So someone this morning actually called me and said, do you have a couple of minutes? I said, yeah. Do you mind that I give you some feedback? I said, yeah, and said, Isaiah, I think sometimes you could come across a little bit too aggressive,
Yeah, like,
or you could come across too
like I'm so
passionate. Yeah,
passionate.
and I was like, what do you mean? This is exciting. So I took that feedback and I said, yeah, well, thank you for giving me that feedback. I'll tone it down a little bit. I'll be more aware of my body language, of my tone of voice. So, I took it well because I believe you can't grow without feedback.
Right.
So it didn't shake me as much as I think feedback is shaping me, and I think that's key for me. I see feedback as a way of forming, not fixing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's really important. I actually I have a group of women that we meet once a month for Cafecito, and it's an entirely Latina group. And when it was created, I wanted it to be like, people are like, "What are you gonna name it?" And I was like, "I'm gonna name it Las Primas."
Las primas, that's
Yeah,
good.
and I was like, because when you think about your primas, they give you feedback, but you take it because you know they love you,
Mm,
because you know it's like with your best interest at heart.
yeah,
And I think that for feedback to land well, you have to know that this is for your best, like it's your growth,
right.
like it's how you're gonna get better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say, and I'm sure this is in the book, but like, what are some examples of bad ways to give feedback? If you had to give a quick synopsis of like, don't do this, what are like the top three feedback mistakes that you can think of?
In regards to just performance issues or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah.
that,
Like, let's say at
well,
work, and you're a first time manager,
mhm,
and you're coming up, right? It's year end review time.
right,
Like, what are some mistakes people should avoid?
when providing feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think let's go back to something you mentioned. I think the groundwork, the foundation, the soil where good feedback happens is when there's high levels of trust,
Yeah.
as you mentioned. I mean, without trust, people flinch when you give it. And so I think that's going to be very important, is creating that type of environment of trust, of being authentic, and that people could
Hmm.
really see that you really care about them.
Yes.
There's something I write in the book about Taylorism. Taylorism is Frederick Taylor was one of the key people of bringing scientific engineering to the workplace in a way. And unfortunately, there's some great things that he brought, but unfortunately, inherent in his philosophy was that people are almost like machines. So I use the three H's, right? The head, the heart, and the hand approach.
Nice.
And so it's people just focus on what people could give, their hands, solamente las manos, the hands. But they forget about people's heart, and they forget about people's head,
Yes.
that the why and the passion. So for me, for feedback to even, because feedback doesn't land on paper, it lands on people. So the first thing is developing that high level trust environment, focus on the whole person, not just the hands,
Yes.
the head, the heart, and the hands. When that's in place, then I think people are more open to receive feedback from you. And so the first law is the law of going first. So the best way that we could start giving feedback is we have to be the first to model it, right? We're the ones that create the model or that culture that we want. So that's what I would say. If I'm modeling it, if I'm cultivating trust, if I'm building trust with the team, when you give feedback with a clear structure, because without structure, it's not sustainable, I think people will be more open to that. So going back to your question about, we would call that transformative feedback when we're highlighting a performance, because it's providing instruction and providing feedback are two different things.
Yes.
Right? Instruction could be very present. Feedback is always reflective. It's about a past action or behavior. So transformative would be that we speak about the behavior or the performance that didn't meet expectations. So that's the first thing. We've got to be specific about that. The second thing is to mention the impact of that behavior. The third principle is to offer an alternative. This is what you should do next time. And then the fourth is obviously, in a way, you want to share that if you do it this way, this is the impact. And then lastly, you want their buy-in or way that they could share. Is any questions? How can I support you better? So that's very quickly, 5 points of the transformative feedback. So if someone keeps on showing up late to work, right, you give transformative feedback. Hey, Isaiah, Nayeli, I want to talk to you about, your constant, showing up late to work.
Right.
And then now, what's the impact of that? Because you're showing up late to work, other people have to step up and do your role or do your job. And then here's what I suggest is you schedule, give yourself 15 more minutes of whatever. Just give yourself 15 more minutes allow yourself 15 more minutes to get here on time. That way.
To take a breath. Get
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah, and then the other thing, what's the impact of that alternative suggestion? Is in that people, we could do the work better as a team, and at the end says, hey, how could I support you? Any questions in regards to that? That would be very quickly a transformative framework that we could use.
That's I like that example, and I like how it's it's like, how do I support? How do I help you? How do I because I think oftentimes when I was in corporate, I remember someone saying, like, one of my bosses was like, "You're not strategic enough," and I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean to you?"
Exactly.
And he's like, "Well, you don't have strategy when you're addressing it," and I was like, "I do have strategy. Actually, this is part of my strategy."
Yeah.
And I pulled up my strategic deck, and I was like, "Look, this was my playbook all along. Like, this, what you're seeing here, and while it's like what you would consider not as forward thinking, but I have to address the now to be able to get in the room to have that conversation for the forward thinking." I was like, so I am building the base to get to there as part of my strategy. And he was like, well, why didn't you show that to me? And I was like, well, why'd you jump to that assumption?
Right.
Exactly. And so, but there was a lot of trust between me and this boss, right? Because I could push back and I could say, no, I don't believe that. But I think that, feedback I love that. I really love that roadmap. That's a really good way of seeing it. I do like pointing out the reason why I brought up the strategic thing is because I'm like, that wasn't quantifiable.
Right.
You're
It's too general.
I'm like, you need to tell me more. Like, why does it feel like it's not strategic?
Right.
Is it because I'm not copying everyone else's strategy? Well, that's because I wrote my own strategy,
Yeah.
or so I think oftentimes I always tell people, like, if you're a first time manager, be very clear and remove the emotion. Talk about some of the facts before you get into
Right.
So
it happens you mentioned two F words.
Oh.
Two other F words that we use. And again, these are F words that HR will approve, right? This is not, so I don't want people rolling their eyes at Cafecito. These are good F words. But you mentioned the what we would call the law of facts and the law of focus. I think how can we minimize the assumptions? And because I think our minds are set up in a way that we're constantly trying to fill in the gap,
Yeah.
right? We're trying to fill in
Yeah.
the gap. So the law of facts is like, hey, there has to be some evidence here.
Right.
It's not based on personality. It's
Or
not
my
based.
feelings.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So I really appreciate that point that we're talking about. Really get facts. Llegaste tarde otra vez. You showed up late again. But when you look back in the last 6 months, you probably showed up late twice.
Right. Right.
So it's like, wait a minute, you're making an assumption, you're jumping to conclusion. So let's get the facts.
Mm-hmm.
And then the focus is, let's focus on one behavior at a time. In the book, I talk about this lady that I was coaching, and she was telling me that her supervisor said that we need to work on this, we need to work on this, we need to work on this, we need to work on that, on the same
You're like, oh my
session.
God.
And she looks at me, she says, I have to be a new person by next week. And that made me laugh, but
Yeah.
it was so sad. It's like, I got to be somebody new. And in 7
Yeah, you're
days,
like, I can't do that.
yeah. So the law of focus is like, listen, work on one behavior, one performance
Yeah.
issue, one thing that we could work on, one action step. So that would be the law of focus, that I think it's so important.
I like that law of focus because you're right. Like, and I think about that even as we set like New Year's resolutions and like goals and like back to school, and we start a second resolution list. And I'm just like, if you didn't lose 45 pounds last year, you're not going to lose 65 pounds this year. You
Right.
have to make them achievable, and you have to, but
Right.
like to your point, it's like one thing at a time,
Mhm.
and know why you're doing it.
Right.
Because you're right. Like if we have to be a whole new person based on our year-end review, like that person didn't exist before. I don't know if they could completely
In the
morph.
next 30 days,
Yeah.
right? And again, I'm not a fan. I understand the value of it, of these annual reviews,
Mhm.
but research is out. That doesn't work. If you wait to, Peter Drucker used to say that, and I'm paraphrasing him, by the way.
Mm.
He used to say something to the effect that the saddest thing he's seen at work is see someone do something incorrectly with enthusiasm. It's like con alegría.
Yeah.
Because no
You're
one
like,
gave him feedback, or
that he
her
was
gave him
doing it
feedback
wrong.
that
Yeah.
he or she was doing it wrong. So that annual evaluation, it's just too late to provide feedback.
It is. It should be done on a more continuous, regular. I always, with my teams, I would always say, like, I'm going to give you feedback right away for two reasons. One, for you to correct the behavior, and two, because I'll forget.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And that would be another F word.
Oh,
That's the law of frequency, right?
yeah.
Research is showing us, Gallup came out and said that, close to 50% of employees have said they have not received feedback from a supervisor the last 6 months. It's like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
So the last 6 months, you have not received any type of feedback. So we got to increase the frequency of providing feedback. So this once a year. So in that performance evaluation, there shouldn't be surprises.
Right. No, there shouldn't be. You should know where you are the whole time.
Exactly. If there are surprises, we're doing it wrong. We're
Yeah.
doing it wrong. So I believe in increasing the frequency of appreciative and transformative feedback. I
I
think you're
love
right.
that. I
Mhm.
love that. So you're from Chicago,
I
right?
am born and raised.
uh, what would you say has been like your biggest moment of growth?
My well, Humble Park is my stomping ground.
I know I'm like, I know New Humble Park would come up.
Yeah, I mean, I learned, you learn so much growing up, in el barrio, in the hood. So you learn about survival, you learn about being innovative, creative, all this stuff you learn. By and large, I was raised by a single mom, so my mom would constantly tell me, "Si tú puedes lograr todos tus sueños. You could accomplish all your dreams." And she was like this superhero that always whispered in my ear, "Who told you couldn't do that? Who
Yeah.
told you couldn't do that? Who told you couldn't do that?" So, I think that formation, having thick skin, tú sabes, being brave and taking chances, I think that all comes from that whole experience of growing up. So I think it gave me this resiliency of bouncing back when I have failed, I've messed up, or even still up to today, when I feel like I bombed out in a workshop or or in a podcast or whatever, whatever the case may be. I said, okay, listen, that shouldn't define me.
Right.
Okay, I made a mistake. Let me get better. Let me grow. Let me learn. I'll be better the next time. So I think that resiliency, that innovative spirit, I think all those things were a part of my upbringing in Humboldt Park.
I think it's a very cultural, like beautiful cultural thing of how much our parents believed in us.
Mm-hmm.
That they believed if they could get us here, we could do whatever.
Right.
And to your point, I think our parents did instill of like, you could do whatever. Ve a la escuela. Ve a la
Mm-hmm.
escuela, and then you could do whatever you want.
Right.
And it was so just beautiful, and I don't want to say innocent in a bad way, but it was innocent in like a very pure way of like,
Mm-hmm.
you really can do anything, and to instill that belief in us that we could do anything. And now I'm like, how did I even do this? And I'm like, oh, because my mom told me I could.
Yeah.
And to have that kind of belief. So I think when we think about feedback and you think about telling people like, no, you can do this,
Right.
that's really life changing. That's life altering, because you're raising the level at which we can dream.
That's right.
And I tell that to my kids all the time. I'm like, if I could have one thing for you, I just want you to dream big. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to dream big, because we're gonna get you there.
Mm.
Whatever it
That's
is,
good.
like if you need to go to camps or you need to do this, or but like if you want to go somewhere, like we're gonna get you there.
That's good. And I think for me also, what played a major role and continues to play a major role in my life is my faith. And it's also the last law, right? It's the law of faith. And
We're gonna
so,
get through all the F words.
yeah, yeah. It's for me, it's understanding that my spiritual walk and the belief that there is that God has placed something in me to share with people to add value. Everything that I'm doing now is still part of what I feel is my divine assignment.
Yay.
And I think when we share that with people and say, hey, whatever I believe in the Imago Dei in everybody, the image of God in everybody, and that everyone has a seed of potential. So the law of faith says this: when you give faith, you have to give faith with the belief that that person has the potential, that they have potential to do great things. So I
Yeah.
think that's important. So my faith is also very important.
I love that. And I love the seed of potential.
Mm-hmm.
I was interviewing someone one time, and he had forgotten his umbrella, and he was coming back, and I already had it. I was by the elevator when he came out, and I was like, you did great. And I was like, you did great. You have a great smile, great confidence. I'm like, don't hide it. I'm like, bring it out. I see it in you.
Mm,
And it just, the next interview, he was a different person.
that's amazing. That's
And
awesome.
I think that I think that when we think of feedback, sometimes we always think of it in a constructive or let me
Mm-hmm.
show you where to improve. But I think sometimes we just need to give nice feedback,
And
good
appreciative.
feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, what you did there is, and that's what we talk about in the law of faith, is you summoned, you brought out something. And that's what feedback is all about. It's not just about informing, it's a level of transforming. It's you summon something out of that person, and that person, the next time they did, I think you said the interview
yeah.
or spoke, they did it differently. The story I give is I was a lot younger. I was supposed to speak at this event, at a youth event, and I never forget, that place was just, it's a lot of people, lights all over. I was the invited speaker, and for that moment, I almost felt I was shrinking. I mean, I was like, I think this is too much for me. And it so happened that my pastor was there with me, and I don't know how he picked that up, that insecurity. He puts his arm around me. He tells me, hey, Isaiah, you're one of my favorite speakers. I can't wait to hear you. I'm here with you. You're not alone.
Oh,
And that word just lifted
just
me.
made you big.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
didn't go out to that stage alone. I went out there with someone else's belief in me, and I think that's what's missing in feedback. It's
the
that we
belief that you
that
can
belief
get
that that
there.
person has the potential to do what we know they can.
I love that. I
Hmm.
love that. Well, we are going to share your book so that you guys can go buy it. Because remember, we always say the best way to support our community is to invest our dollars in our community and to buy what they're selling, buy our products, buy the books. So we'll have a link for you to connect with Isaias
Thank you.
on LinkedIn through the book. You know, if you want to reach out to him, because I think that part of our responsibility is when you put something like this out there, is, you know, gotta be accessible to your fans.
I appreciate that.
The
Here
other
it is.
F.
This is your copy.
Yes, this is our copy here.
Yes, thank you.
So, but we look forward to one, hopefully more teaching, more learning,
Thank you.
more growth. We're here to cheer you on because, you know, everything you do for yourself makes us all look better.
Thank you. And thank you, Nayeli, for just this opportunity and for supporting local leadership, because I do believe more than ever we need to continue to highlight our voices, that so many things and so many people want to shut it down. So thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank
course,
you for
of
that.
course. No, thank you for that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next time on Corporate Cafecito. Have a wonderful week.